Heat rolled off the desert like a poor man's fever, curling dust into the rafters of the Comet Saloon and turning lamp oil smoke the color of brass. Cade Rowan pushed through batwing doors with just 3 coins left to rattle in his pocket, and a mare named Bramble tethered outside. More ribs and horse after 3 states of riding. He'd planned to trade the animal for water, but plans shriveled fast when the saloon piano struck a ragged chord, and the floor boss yelled for a high-stakes liar's draw. Cade was a drifting fence rider, better with lariat than cards. Yet he slid into a vacant chair, because thirst made fools bold. 5 hands later he was on a streak. Small pots fattened his coin purse to a gratifying clink. Then the twin Spurs foreman swaggered in, silver spurs ringing like church bells, and bought the table clean with a single throw of greenbacks. "Raise you the horse outside," the foreman taunted, eyeing Bramble's saddle through plank cracks. Cade's pulse jerked. He should have folded, but pride had teeth. Cards flew. Sweat dappled his collar. Cade needed 1 heart for a flush. The dealer turned a spade. Twin spurs slapped down a full house. Chairs scraped as onlookers hooted. Cade swallowed dry air, signed over Bramble's reins, and stood to leave before shame pinned him. "Hold," the foreman sneered, lifting a burlap-hooded figure from the back of the room. Ankles chained, wrists bound. The veiled woman swayed under the push, slight frame wrapped in dusty serape. Face unseen. "Too much bother," he said, spinning her toward Cade. "You took my horse. Take this trouble, too." Shame shifted to something hotter. Cade caught the woman before she hit floor. Up close the burlap reeked of stale liquor and wagon dust. Beneath the veil, 2 dark eyes glimmered like wet obsidian. She didn't fight, just watched as if cataloging exits. Cade flicked a thumbnail against her chain. "Not a beast for barter. Suit yourself." The foreman shrugged, pocketed Bramble's reins, and sauntered into dusk. Saloon laughter drained as soon as he stepped out. Gambling smoke hung awkward without him. Cade laid 3 last coins on the table, ran for a debt he didn't owe, and cut the woman's shackles with a rust-eaten cleaver someone slid across. Outside, afternoon baked color from the world. Cade guided her into the alley, sliced the burlap hood's cord. Cloth fell. Coal-black hair tumbled loose. Bruises marbled one cheek. She blinked against glare, but didn't cower. Cade offered a canteen. She drank in measured swallows, never spilling a drop. "Name's Cade," he said. She pulled the serape tighter, offered no answer. Bramble neighed from the hitch rail. New owner already strapping her saddle. Cade's got twisted as the mare jerked against unfamiliar hands. He stepped forward, but Twin Spurs' ranch hand slid between, pistols heavy at hips. Animals won fair, they growled. Cade weighed odds, 1 empty holster versus 3 full ones, and backed away. The mare's plaintive whinny followed him down the dusty street. The woman touched Cade's sleeve, a whisper of thanks or warning. He couldn't tell. He led her toward the church steps, only building with intact shade. A ragged banner announced, "Parley tomorrow, Twin Spurs and double bar, and no firearms until noon." Locals whispered both ranch crews had already smuggled guns. Cade read tension in every boarded window. Blood would water this dusk-come dawn. Sheriff Harlan, whiskey-red nose and badge dull from neglect, lounged against the post office. Seeing Cade shelter the woman, he spat. "Gonna be rough morning," he slurred. Town could use a miracle. Then he shuffled off, leaving miracle work to strangers. Night draped over Comet Ridge. Cade scrounged bedrolls from the livery loft. Owner too frightened to charge. He gave the woman the thicker blanket, turned away while she settled on a hay bale. Wind poked through warp boards, carrying hoarse sweat, lamp smoke, and anxious prayers from clapper houses. Moonlight found her awake, knees tucked, hands clasped around her throat, as though guarding the small cage where voice lived. Cade offered jerky. She shook her head, lips motioning water. He passed the canteen again. When she drank, silver glinted at her collar, tiny pendant shaped like a lyre. "You sing?" he asked, surprising himself. Her eyelids flinched. She unhooked the pendant, pressed it into his palm, and traced a single letter on his wrist. M. Cade's heart thumped. "M for your name?" She nodded once, pulled the serape tight, and lay down. Soon her breath steadied into shallow tides. Cade sat watch, eyes on the street through slats. Somewhere beyond town, spurs clinked, guns checked. Storm clouds without rain. He thought of Bramble, ears twitching under foreign reins, and the wager that traded horse for human mystery. As dawn paled, he vowed silently that if blood came, he wouldn't let it wash over her too. Sun climbed hot and unforgiving. At 10, twin spurs riders lined the east and the main. 15 men, rifles slung, silver conchos glinting. Double bar rolled from the west, dust billowing. Sheriff Harlan stood in the middle, hat in hand, voice quivering through a red proclamation no one cared to hear. Cade and them watched from the church porch. He tensed, she still bundled in serape. At Sheriff's last breath, curses spat across the gap. A twin spurs rifle raised. That's when M stepped forward, serape dropping to reveal plain calico dress and cracked boots. She inhaled, spine straightening like a bowstring, and released a single note into the blistered air. It began gentle, a brook under ice, then widened, warm, resonant, undeniable. Conversation stalled. The note curved upward, gained octave, shimmered against clapper walls, reached rafters bleached by sun, and echoed down. She modulated into a melodic line no English tongue owned, minor, aching, carrying rains from far coasts and dawns from lost orchards. Gun sagged. A double-bar youth let his rifle, but kissed dust. An older twin spur's hand closed watery eyes. Shoulders collapsed as if war years slipped off. When her voice slid into a descending cadence, softer than a mother's hush, even the sheriff's breath hitched. Silence followed, the kind after thunder, when the air waits to see if earth still stands. M turned, walked back to Cade, and folded serape over shoulders. Men looked at barrels as though waking from dream. The twin spurs foreman spat, muttered later, and signaled withdrawal. Double bar mirrored. Horses wheeled, tension retreating beyond horizon. Cade felt knees weaken. He touched her sleeve in wonder. She managed a half-smile, first sign her lips could bend at all, then whispered, hoarse but clear, "Maria." The name settled between them like a seed, ready for rain. Behind, townspeople peeked from doors, faces soft with disbelief. Sheriff Harlan lifted hat, placed it over heart, and for once found no whiskey word. Maria slipped pendant back around neck. Cade realized his gamble had spun fortune beyond coins or horses. A voice that could unbend rifles. A woman reclaimed by her own name. Evening cooled the street, dust swirling low like memory leaving. Cade led Maria to the livery. The owner, gratitude shining, offered the drifter's mare back. Foreman had traded her for whiskey and vanished. As Bramble nuzzled Cade's palm, Maria stroked the mare's mane, humming a softer fragment of her song. The animal stilled, eyes half-lidded. They rode out at dusk, following the railroad grade toward greener country. Cade carried nothing but bedroll and faith in what music could rebuild. Maria's veil fluttered behind, now more banner than prison. And in the hush that followed their travel, Dry Needles folk spoke of a day bullets bowed to melody, and of a drifter who learned that losing a horse was the cheapest wager he'd ever make. Moon drafted silver lines across the railroad grade as Cade and Maria pushed east, Bramble's hooves clicking on loosened spikes. The night smelled of creosote and distant river damp. They rode without lantern. Maria's ears caught every tumbleweed scrape. Cade's eyes trusted starlight, but still they stopped twice to listen, certain some remnant of twin spurs' anger prowled their back trail. Only coyotes answered, yapping at the half-moon. Near midnight, they camped on the lee of a sandstone cut. Cade gathered brittle sage, coaxed a fist-high fire. Maria spread his blanket, sat cross-legged in side glow. Wind tried to claim her song, but she croaked one bar, voice frayed by the day's miracle, then fell silent, shaking her head at the rasp. Cade brewed creekwater coffee, added a twig of pinyon to soothe her throat. She sipped, eyes glistening. When she offered cup back, he caught a whisper of gratitude in Spanish. Gracias. It hung between them, delicate as ash, before wind whisked away. Dawn arrived raw and colorless. They followed telegraph poles toward the next whistle stop. Whiskey Bend, 3 shacks and a water tower leaning like a spent drunk. No train since spring washouts. Yet Cade hoped for news. At the depot ruin, an old switchman warmed beans on a brazier. He squinted at Maria, recognizing her from rumor already outrunning yesterday's dust. Word is Twin Spurs posted bounty now. $50 dead or breathing. Jesus, the switchman, said his name was, though he hadn't prayed in years. He offered Cade a coil of rusty chain, good for fetters you'll never use, and refused payment for 2 canteens topped with silk cold water. When Maria sang 4 notes in farewell, his cataract eyes brimmed until he waved them down the track, muttering that angels shouldn't travel on foot. By noon, the grade bent south, cutting through cactus flats alive with pink bloom. Cade walked beside Bramble to spare the mare's back. Maria removed her veil at last, stuffing it in saddlebag. Sunlight traced faint scars along her cheek, but her gaze faced the horizon unflinching. "I was sold 3 times," she said suddenly, accent soft as worn silk. Cade kept stride slow, so words could find footing. She told fragments. Farm in Sonora gone to drought. Father gambling debts. Wagon north. A night of guns and burlap. Her voice never cracked, though Cade's palms tightened on reins. When silence returned, she asked of him. He spoke of drifting fence to fence since the fever took his parents, of losing more wages to whiskey tables than he'd ever admit, and of Bramble, the only creature that believed I'd go farther than the next ridge. Maria listened with neither pity nor judgment, and something in Cade's chest settled like a tool finally placed on its peg. They made camp beside a half-collapsed water tank. Cade inspected beams, dry rot ready to snap, and decided they'd pass the night elsewhere. Too late. A rifle cracked from the scrub. Bullet split dust a yard from Bramble's foreleg. Cade dragged Maria behind the tank wall, scanning mesquite for muzzle flash. Another shot punched the iron staves above his head, ringing the tower like a funeral bell. Her bounty hunters had caught the rumor faster than the wind. Cade fired once, forcing silence. Maria touched his shoulder, shook her head. She parted her lips and let sound spill, a low hum first, then a rising tri that vibrated iron sheets. The water tower turned her note into a cathedral organ. Desert air quivered. Somewhere in the brush a horse screamed. Reins clattered. Hoofbeats fled. Minutes stretched. No more shots. When echo died, bighorn sheep answered from distant sill, as if to ask what god had passed by. They waited until sunset painted rock blood orange. Cade found 2 rifles abandoned where horses had spooked. Bullet pouches held Twin Spurs brand. Confirmation. He buried the weapons, not wishing their iron to return as ghosts. Maria pressed her palm on the disturbed earth, murmured what sounded like a blessing. That night firelight revealed fever flush on Cade's neck, where sunbed all afternoon. Maria soaked bandana in cool coffee grounds, lay across burnt skin, singing under breath until tension melted from his jaw. She lulled him into first deep sleep since Dry Needle. Alone with embers, she took the rusty chain the switchman had gifted, broke a short length off, and bent links into crude ring. Iron that once meant bondage recast as promise. Morning found Cade carving new stirrup leathers. Maria slipped ring into his palm without speech. He studied it, understood. "We'll find a preacher again," he said. She shook her head. No need. The vow already lived. Cade slid iron onto left thumb, its roughness a reminder of the price of both freedom and devotion. 2 days later the grade spilled into Rio Claro Valley, a quilt of orchards and poplar windbreaks fed by spring melt. They stopped at the first farmhouse where a woman hauled buckets from irrigation ditch. She recognized Maria's pendant lyre, gasped, and ushered them toward porch. Inside waited a frail man on cot. Padre Ortiz, a mission cantor who had taught orphan choir girls before raids burned the chapel. He had believed Maria dead. Tears blurred his reading glasses when she knelt, kissing his callous choir master fingers. Ortiz's farmhand dug through trunk, producing papers. Land deed south of the border, proof of debts settled by governor decree. With these, the bounty died. Twin Spurs' claim would rot in any marshal's hand. They stayed 3 nights, helping prune frostbitten orange trees. Cade's broad back hauled branches. Maria worked shears with surgeon precision, humming counterpoint to birds rehearsing for summer. On the final dawn, Ortiz blessed their road. Cade traded labor for a pack mule laden with dried fruit and blankets, scented of citrus bloom. The old cantor placed a roll of sheet music into Maria's hands. Her own compositions he had saved from ashes, notes inked in steady lines. She pressed pages of heart, then folded them into saddle pouch like arrow feathers. They traveled east again, aim undefined yet alive. Each town greeted them first with suspicion, then with awe when Maria's voice spun gatherings into peace circles. People offered eggs, tools, sometimes only smiles, but the ledger of kindness thickened. Cade fought only once more, knocking a drunk gambler flat for grabbing Maria's arm. But he found he needed fists less than before. Her song paved gentler paths. By midsummer, they crossed into Black Mesa country, where cottonwoods lined a cool creek. There they paused, built a lean-to, and watched clouds herd across the vast blue. Maria sat on a fallen trunk, leaf parchment on her knee, sketching new melodies while Cade shaped logs into square beams. In her silence, she was composing a home. In his noise, he was framing the walls. Between hammer blows, she sang fragments, each phrase a timber dropped on the foundation. One evening, lightning flickered on the mesa edge. Cade worried about flash floods, but Maria stepped into open, arms raised. The storm skirted wide, rain falling in silver sheets that never touched their camp yet left the creek singing louder. Cade decided then that some wagers a man makes only once. He would stake all tomorrows on this quiet miracle who turned bullets aside and convinced weather to listen. They marked that night by hanging the iron ring on a rawhide strip over the doorway of their half-built cabin. Wind slid through chink gaps, rattling ring like distant chimes. Under its music, Cade carved fresh words onto a flat beam. Lost horse, found song, luck requited. Maria traced the letters, added beneath in small, neat script. Song rides further with 2 hearts than a herd of guns. Their shadows blended on the beam as fire burned low, and beyond the cottonwoods the world wheeled onward, chasing trouble of its own. Yet on that creek bend, under a ring once forged with chains, a drifter and a singer laid down the night certain that the next hand dealt, whatever card showed, would be theirs to play together. A dawn the color of raw copper rose over the half-framed cabin. Cade woke to hammer his breath white against the chill. Maria, already stirring coals, greeted him with a nod and a half-whisper fragment of the melody she'd been building on parchment. The pack mule snorted where it dozed under cottonwoods, plum blossoms drifting onto its back like cotton. They had camped beside this creek 4 weeks, each day pressing wilderness into shape. First came the 4 stone footings Cade wrestled into square. Then the sill logs, bark stripped so the spirits of rot and termite would find no purchase. Maria set the beam level by eye alone, surprising him with an instinct for plumb none but a carpenter should possess. She laughed, still a cautious sound when it balanced perfect. At midday, they walked upstream to find a spring. Maria traced the ground with a willow wand, humming the lowest note she owned. Cade swore the twig dipped on its own. Digging 6 feet, they struck a seep cold as snow melt. He rigged a trough of hollowed cottonwood. Water trickled clear, promising an orchard someday. They traded days building and nights planning. Cade stretched his hand wide against the stars, mapping rafters only he could see. Maria countered with charcoal sketches of a stove alcove, a shelf for sheet music, a window tall enough to frame sunrise, so that song could travel straight into morning. Compromise came easy. Each kept just enough of the other's dream to own it together. But wilderness was not empty. Beyond the South Mesa, cattle crews drifted, some twin Spurs men nursing grudges deep in the bullets still lodged in their saddles. One frost-sharp dawn, Cade found hoofprints circling the cabin frame. For horses' narrow shoes, the stride of riders scouting rather than passing. He knelt, fingered the depressions until splinters bit his calloused thumb. Maria approached, veil gone, braid whipping in the wind. He pointed to the sign. She studied, then pressed 2 fingers to her lips. Silence, but not fear. They double-watched that night. Cade stood under the half-hung rafters, rifle balanced, while Maria hummed inside, slow rhythmic pulse to steady his breathing. The wind carried nothing but sand whispers, yet both knew trouble rode somewhere behind it. 3 nights later trouble arrived. Moon half-bright lit 3 silhouettes easing down the slope, torches capped. Cade's rifle caught starlight. Maria's hand stilled his shoulder. She stepped forward into clearing, voice lifting, A new melody, urgent, minor chords unresolved. The lead rider, scarred cheek, twin spurs brand on boot, reined in unsettled. Cade heard the tremor. The men recognized that sound, the sound that robbed them of blood sport and dry needle. Their horses stomped, heads twisting. Maria's song climbed, thread of silver cutting the dark. The scarred rider spat, waving torch. He wasn't here for music. He drew a pistol. Cade fired first, a warning shot to torch itself. Flame burst, dying against night as sparks hissed to ground. Darkness swallowed gunsight. Maria's voice dropped suddenly to a whisper-low note that seemed to hover in the marrow of every bone. The horses bolted. One rider tumbled. The others clutched reins, swore, and kicked after them. Hoofbeats faded into canyon echo. Silence snapped closed. Cade exhaled, wondering how many chances fate would grant before lead outsang melody. Maria pressed her forehead to his chest. He could feel how his own heart hammered a frantic beat against her calm. He realized she never reached for the knife since drying needle. Her weapon lived in windpipes and courage. By first light they were packing. The frame could wait. Safety could not. They loaded nails, saws, parchment. The mules' panniers heavy with oranges Padre Ortiz had insisted they take. Bramble took saddle again. They followed the creek northeast, toward rumors an abandoned stage station where law sometimes camped. 3 days upstream led them into aspen groves shimmering like silver coins. The station stood ruined under the trees. 2 walls, a stone hearth still solid. They set camp and found neighbors soon. A Ute family running sheep, and a widow named Selah, who managed a telegraph spur 2 miles on. Selah, hair gray as river granite, greeted Maria with the hush of someone who had survived too many men's tempers. She recognized bounty hunters by the print sketch still circulating, and offered wire to Denver marshals, an official clearing of Maria's name. Cade purchased a message with 2 lengths of maple he'd mill for rafters. Selah's cabin needed flooring, and trade is only barter of needs. Word returned by wire 5 days later. The warrant on Maria and Northwood void. Twin spurs foreman fined for illicit traffic. No further claims valid. Cade read the telegram twice, then burned it to embers, letting the final Ashdrift Creek ward. Spring rounded toward early summer. With danger slackened, they hauled their logs back to the Cottonwood Bend and raised walls in earnest. Selah's teenage son helped set ridge beam. The Ute brothers lent stone and story. Community budded like choke cherry blossoms. Maria planted peach pits Padre Ortiz had slipped into her pocket. Cade built a smokehouse, so meat would carry them through winters thicker than they'd yet imagined. On a Sunday soft with bees they wed. No preacher present. Just Selah reading a psalm and the Ute elder tying rawhide around their joined wrists. Cade gave Maria a thin band he'd forged from ironwood root wrapped in beaten silver shaving. Emblem of strength she taught him. Maria answered with a song she had saved, notes etched onto the wind itself, its final chord resolving the melody she had once loosed upon rifles. When her voice fell silent, the world seemed cleaner, edges sanded smooth. Later, alone beneath their new roof scenting of fresh sap, they painted the beam above the hearth with mixture of clay and ash. Cade wrote, "Luck lost me a horse, gave me a world." Maria added, "A world sings back when the heart risks listening." Thunder rolled distant, promising rain for orchards yet to leaf. They lay in lamplight, bramble nickering outside, the mule rattling harness, and the ring of rawhide still binding their wrists. No tavern smoke, no bounty shadow, only the hush earned acre by acre. Cade thought of the burlap sack once hiding her face, of the muffled voice now blooming notes across the valley. He tasted the air and found it richer than any gamble ever wagered. Morning returned with robin chatter. Cloud banks slid off mesas, spilling light across peach seedlings already lifting tiny fists of green. Cade shouldered axe for timber trim. Maria rolled parchment to capture new melody, mercy of morning in every stave. But first they paused at the door, iron ring clinking on lintel. Together they untied the rawhide, hung it beside, and stepped out, wrist-free, but linked by choice stronger than rope, ready to raise rafters high enough that even the wind would have to duck and listen on its way through. Morning returned with robin chatter. Cloud banks slid off the mesas, spilling gold across newly planed rafters. Ripples of sun raced up the cabin's north wall and found Maria already awake, cradling parchment on her knees. Outside, Cade tested Joy's strength with 2 careful stomps, satisfied when the beams held. The rawhide ring they'd hung by the doorway bobbed in the breeze, clacking softly like a metronome set to the tempo of their days. By noon, they lifted a final ridge board. Selah's boy and the Ute brothers chanting in cadence with Cade's hammer, Maria's bright hum stitching across the rhythm like weft-through warp. When it locked into place, the whole valley answered. Cottonwoods rattled seed pods. Creek waters slapped stones. A hawk screeched overhead. Cade wiped sweat, laughed, and for the first time let the sound roll unguarded. Afternoon, heat drew honey from pine sap. Maria slipped inside, pressing sheet music drafts flat against a new-hewn table so resin wouldn't curl edges. One draft bore a title, Bramble Road, notes coursing down staves like hoofbeats. She added a footnote, voice and lariat duet. She discovered Cade could carry melody with a taut riata, spinning circles in sync with her cadence, ropes slashing air on offbeats. It would be their offering at the harvest gathering Padre Ortiz planned, the host once roads dried. Cade found her scribbling and set 2 cups of creek-cool water beside the page. She drank, then guided his finger over fresh notations, explaining rests and ties until his brow furrowed less. He confessed music looked to him like winter tracks, wild, but readable if one followed patiently. She grinned, smoothing the page. Outside, the Ute brothers shouted for help hoisting stone into chimney. Cade answered, but not before brushing a kiss across her ink-smudged knuckles, an everyday miracle still new enough to feel improbable. Evening arrived, scented with cedar smoke and peach blossom. Sailor rode in with her son, and a telegraph slip stamped Denver. Reward stricken, case closed. She read it aloud before the half-framed porch. Cade nodded thanks. Maria exhaled a breath she hadn't known she'd been guarding since twin spurs. Sailor handed over a parcel, bolt of calico the color of rain-washed sage, payment for the flooring planks Cade had milled. Maria ran fabric through her fingers, already measuring curtains in her mind. They shared stew around a fire sugar-sweet with onion grass. Selah's boy plucked Cade's carved cedar token from the mantel and asked what the swirl meant. Cade answered, luck turning into promise. Maria added, and promise turning into song. The boy nodded as if that made perfect horse sense, and returned the chip to its rightful place beneath the charcoal lines. That night, under walls that finally breathed as a house, Cade and Maria lay listening to rain patter the fresh-laid shakes. He recounted every mile between dry needle and here, each one a stitch in a wound neither had realized could heal. She traced the ridge of his brow, whispering that fear loses voice when one has a better story to tell. He brushed a thumb across the healed welt on her cheek. The scar barely rose anymore, but he loved how it gleamed when lamplight found it. Proof of a past survived. They woke before dawn to bray the mule and a new sound. The delicate crack of a peach blossom splitting in the night's last cold. Maria raced out barefoot, Cade behind, and they watched first petals unfold, dew trembling on edges. The pitch he had planted in shaky hope now crowned itself with color. Cade tugged his hat, murmuring, let's start that orchard row today. She agreed. New life ought to stand with kin. By breakfast they had saplings lined in neat ranks, each hole watered, each trunk wrapped in burlap to guard against wind. Summer matured. The foal, named Lyra for the pendant Maria still wore, galloped through tall sedge. Cade finished shingling, then crafted an arched doorway wide enough for a stretcher. Babies, lumber, or burdens. Maria teased him, but kept the plank he'd carve home is what fits through the door you build. She mounted it above the lintel as her final melody for the house. Harvest season came early. Barley heads bent fat, peaches blushed gold pink, and the bean trellis groaned. Padre Ortiz arrived with a wagon full of choir orphans who needed sturdy shoes and sturdier examples. They camped in the meadow, weaving flower crowns while Cade dug post holes for a stage platform, and Maria taught them breath exercises between sips of creek water. At sundown, they all dined on stew spiked with Ortiz's orange peel and the orchard's first fruit sliced thin. The concert lit the valley. Lanterns ringed the platform, moths dancing like sparks. The children opened with hymns that fluttered fragile but held. Then Cade stepped up, lariat coiled. Maria began Bramble Road, her voice unspooling steady as dawn, Kate cracking rhythm with rope snaps that popped like snares. Lyra snorted approval from fence line, the mule brayed on the downbeat. Sailor laughed till tears wet her collar, and even the stoic Ute elder tapped boot heel. When the last chord fell, silence hung brilliant as starlight, broken only when Ortiz bellowed encore, and half the valley joined. News of the evening drifted downriver all the way to Dry Needle, where Sheriff Harlan now ran a sober storefront. He tacked up a poster of Maria's next recital. No bounty this time, just 5-cent admission and free coffee if you promise to leave rifles at home. As autumn's first frost silvered the beans, Kate stood beside the rows that once marked Gunfire's end. It sprawled now, petals the deep red of hearth coals. He counted buds, then chalked a line on the porch post. Year 1. Next year, another mark. A ledger, not of debts, but of season's steward. Inside, Maria added to her songbook. Beside Bramble Road, she inked a new title, $2 silver, paid in full. Notes ascended, dipped and rose again. Echo of the saloon smoke, the card's sharp slide, the hush before her voice first ricocheted off gunmetal. She paused, pressed fingertip to iron ring strung on rawhide above the doorway, and smiled. The cabin, cedar bones, cottonwood sinew, peach flesh sole, stood ready for winter's test. Yet to Cade and Maria the wind felt less like threat, more like chorus filling the rafters they'd raised for it. Their love had begun as a gamble, staked on a mare and a muffled prisoner. Now it towered like the ridge beam above them, joined grain to grain, stronger than the axes that cut it, flexing but unbreakable, singing back to every storm. If this tale carried you upstream, let its current linger. Click like, hit subscribe, and share which moment struck a chord. Your voice keeps the song echoing across new valleys.